In our headlines on this Wednesday, September 24th, here in South Korea. President Lee Jae-myung pledges to end the vicious cycle of unnecessary tensions with North Korea and proposes a pragmatic and phased solution to denuclearization of the regime's nuclear weapons program. And on the sidelines of his UN agenda, President Lee Jae-myung engages in bilateral interactions with world leaders, including the head of the UN and his counterparts from Uzbekistan and the Czech Republic, to touch upon issues of common interest. Meanwhile, following its annual consultation with authorities here, the IMF raises its growth outlook for South Korea to 0.9% this year, citing the support provided by the government's second supplementary budget. We start over in New York, where President Lee Jae-myung delivered his keynote speech at the UN General Assembly on Tuesday local time, sharing a fresh initiative for potential engagement with North Korea. Arirang's Yoon Jung-min has our top story.
A new initiative to end confrontation on the Korean Peninsula was among the overarching themes during the first UN speech by South Korean President Lee Jae-myung.
교류, 관계 정상화, 비핵화, 즉 END를 중심으로 한 포괄적인 대화로 한반도에서의 적대와 대결의 시대를 종식하고 평화 공존과 공동 성장의 새 시대를 열어가야 합니다.
By that, he meant expanding inter-Korean exchanges, seeking efforts to advance inter-Korean relations as well as the relationship between North Korea and the U.S., while seeking realistic and rational solutions to achieve denuclearization. President Lee revisited his three-stage roadmap involving halting, reducing, and dismantling North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. He once again made it clear that Seoul is not pursuing any form of unification by absorption. And his debut on the world's major stage for multilateral diplomacy meant more than just that.
저는 오늘 세계 시민의 등불이 될 새로운 대한민국이 국제사회에 완전히 복귀했음을 당당하게 선언합니다.
He was referring to Korea's recovery from the martial law incident last December, adding that the resilience of Korea's democracy not just belongs to Korea but to the entire world, in tandem with the UN spirit. He also laid out his vision for the use of AI that can contribute to the universal values of humanity, which will also top the agenda for the UN Security Council open debate on Wednesday local time, led by a South Korean leader for the first time. During his roughly 20-minute speech on Tuesday, he mentioned Republic of Korea 33 times. And here at the UN General Assembly, the South Korean leader did not forget to mention K-culture, saying it connects people all over the world beyond borders, language, and cultural differences, stressing universal empathy and solidarity. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, New York.
On the sidelines of his official UN agenda, President Lee Jae-myung engaged in a number of bilateral interactions to touch upon issues of common interest. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yu-jin reports.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung is making the most of the UN General Assembly's high-level week, often described as the world's biggest stage for multilateral diplomacy. President Lee held a series of one-on-ones with world leaders on Tuesday at the UN headquarters. His first meeting was with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres. National Security Advisor Wi Sung-rak told reporters that the UN chief voiced support for the president's North Korea policy, the END initiative, short for Exchange, Normalization, and Denuclearization, which he laid out in his address to the General Assembly.
Secretary General Guterres conveyed his hope that the initiative will contribute to peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. We will work to build a framework where exchange, normalization of relations, and denuclearization can all reinforce one another through inter-Korean dialogue and North Korea-U.S. talks.
President Lee in turn stressed that security on the Korean Peninsula is inseparable from global stability, the very mission of the United Nations. Lee also met with Uzbekistan President Shavkat Mirziyoyev and Czech President Petr Pavel.
We held discussions on practical cooperation directly tied to our businesses and economic growth, focusing on achieving results that people in both countries can feel in daily life.
With Pavel, the $18 billion nuclear power plant deal signed in June was highlighted, and the two leaders agreed to expand their strategic partnership to semiconductors, electric vehicles, and defense. Talks with Mirziyoyev explored ways to elevate South Korea and Uzbekistan's special strategic partnership with a particular focus on mineral resources and transportation infrastructure. Now, more bilateral meetings are lined up for Wednesday, President Lee's last day at the UN General Assembly. The presidential office previously said that President Lee will also be sitting down with the leaders of France, Italy, and Poland. 송유진, Arirang News, New York.
And President Lee Jae-myung wrapped up his second day in New York by hosting a dinner for foreign policy experts on Tuesday evening. According to National Security Advisor Wi Sung-rak, talks touched upon improving the U.S. visa system, in light of, that is, the recent detention and subsequent departure of hundreds of South Korean engineers and technicians from Georgia, as well as bilateral trade negotiations. Among those invited were the editor-in-chief of the American magazine Foreign Affairs, as well as heads of policy institutes, including the Korea Society. Meanwhile, here in Seoul, the reaction within the political arena to President Lee Jae-myung's UN address was deeply divided. The ruling Democratic Party highlighted the president's attendance at the General Assembly as a starting point for South Korea to establish itself as a key player in democracy, peace, and economic cooperation. Party leader Chung Chung-nae said the president's speech was a reflection of true leadership and pragmatic diplomacy based on national interests. In sharp contrast, main opposition People Power Party leader Chang Dong-hyuk dismissed the president's initiative on inter-Korean dialogue as a repeat of failed past policies. The party also claimed his speech included an unrealistic view of the security, urging for careful assessment of the reality on the Korean Peninsula and to outline clear strategies to address security risks. U.S. President Donald Trump has adopted a tougher rhetoric regarding Russia. Speaking at the UN back on Tuesday, he warned of powerful tariffs should Russia maintain its military offensive, while also asserting that Ukraine should seek to regain its territory and that NATO allies should shoot down Russian drones violating their airspace. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump delivered a combative speech at the United Nations General Assembly in New York on Tuesday, warning Russia that he is prepared to impose strong economic measures over the war in Ukraine.
In the event that Russia is not ready to make a deal to end the war, then the United States is fully prepared to impose a very strong round of powerful tariffs which would stop the bloodshed, I believe.
However, Trump said he wants America's allies to match those steps, especially by cutting off Russian oil purchase before Washington takes action.
China and India are the primary funders of the ongoing war by continuing to purchase Russian oil. But inexcusably, even NATO countries have not cut off much Russian energy and Russian energy products, which, as you know, I found out about 2 weeks ago, and I wasn't happy.
On the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Trump also held talks with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, asked whether NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they violate Allied airspace. He agreed they should be able to. The comments come as Russian drones and fighter jets have repeatedly crossed into the skies of Poland, Estonia, and other NATO members. The alliance has already held emergency consultations under Article 4 and warned Moscow that Article 5, which calls for collective defense, could be triggered. Trump later posted on Truth Social that with the European Union's support, Ukraine is in a position to fight back, reclaim its territory, and ultimately defeat Russia. He added that Washington will continue to supply NATO with weapons so that they can use them as they see fit, signaling continued indirect weapons support for Ukraine. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, South Korea's top finance and trade officials are actively seeking to secure an agreement with Washington over the finer details of the trade framework hammered out in late July regarding lower tariffs in return for greater investments. Our Park Chun-an has the latest.
South Korea's Finance Minister Koo Yoon-chul is set to meet U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in New York on Wednesday to address stalled tariff negotiations. This meeting comes after a deal was made in July to lower U.S. tariffs on South Korean goods from 25% to 15%, which was tied to a pledge by Seoul to invest $350 billion in the U.S. However, some details in the deal, particularly regarding the investment package, have yet to be finalized. The U.S. is demanding that South Korea significantly increase the share of direct investment within the $350 billion commitment made to the U.S. in exchange for the implementation of a 15% tariff for South Korean automobiles. The South Korean government maintains that a $350 billion cash deal would shock the country's foreign exchange market. President Lee Jae-myung warned in an interview with Reuters last week that without a currency swap, withdrawing and investing that sum in the manner the U.S. is demanding would mean another IMF situation for South Korea, referring to the 1997 Asian financial crisis. South Korea's Trade Minister Yo Han-gu departed for Malaysia on Tuesday to attend the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting, where he will meet U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer.
We understand the tariff challenges for our companies in sectors like semiconductors and steel, and we're working to reflect their interests. We're engaging through various channels to secure safeguards and ensure fair commercial terms.
But with the ASEAN Economic Ministers meeting the primary purpose of Yo's visit, it's believed it would be difficult for follow-up tariff negotiations to achieve meaningful progress. Park Chun-an, Arirang News.
The International Monetary Fund has raised its outlook for South Korea's economic growth this year to 0.9%. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon covers this upward revision as well as the concerns shared for the near future.
Following a 2-week annual consultation with South Korean authorities, the IMF has adjusted its 2025 growth projection for the nation upward by 0.1 percentage point to 0.9%. It attributed the revision to the positive impact of a second supplementary budget, which included giving out spending coupons to all citizens. The forecast for 2026 remains unchanged at 1.8%.
Growth is expected to reach 0.9% in 2025 as domestic demand gradually recovers, supported by more accommodative fiscal and monetary policies, and strong semiconductor external demand offsets decline in other exports.
The IMF described the government's current accommodative fiscal stance as appropriate for now, given that growth is tracking below the country's potential. But the fund warns that this approach is not sustainable. It highlighted South Korea's demographic crisis, one of the world's fastest aging populations, as a critical long-term risk that will exert immense pressure on public finances.
But as you know, with rapid aging in Korea, the spending pressures in the medium to long term are going to rise, which could make debt levels go up substantially over the medium and the near term.
To create fiscal space for future spending, the IMF stressed that reforms to the pension system, mobilizing more revenue, and enhancing spending efficiency are essential. The fund also advised adopting a credible medium-term fiscal anchor to ensure long-term debt sustainability. However, the report cautions that the entire outlook is tilted to the downside.
Prolonged global trade policy uncertainty, intensification of geopolitical tensions, they could weigh on growth, and disrupt trade and investments. Apart from that, faster than expected slowdown in major trading partners of Korea could adversely affect exports and hence growth.
The IMF added that revitalizing domestic demand and diversifying Korea's export structure will be essential for more resilient growth. Gradually deleveraging households, reducing labor market rigidities, and addressing demographic challenges could help boost domestic demand. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Telecom and credit card companies at the center of recent large-scale hacking incidents came under fire at a National Assembly hearing on this Wednesday. In a rash of bipartisan solidarity, lawmakers slammed the firms for poor oversight and attempts to downplay the breaches. KT Corporation admitted to mismanaging small cell base stations linked to unauthorized payments and apologized for causing public concern. Lotte Card also issued an apology pledging to speed up card reissuance for over 1 million affected customers. Former First Lady Kim Gun-hee denied all charges of corruption against her at the Seoul Central District Court earlier on this Wednesday afternoon. She's been indicted on allegations of stock manipulation involving Deutsche Motors and receiving illicit funds from the Unification Church. The court allowed partial media coverage today, and Kim was seen in a black suit with her inmate number displayed on her chest. This coming Friday, the court will set the schedule for witness questioning and other related procedures. This year, Seoul and Cairo mark 30 years of diplomatic relations, and to celebrate this occasion, Egypt is hosting a series of events to better promote cultural exchanges between the two countries. Our An Sung-jin files this report from the Egyptian capital city.
The land of the pyramids. With over 7,000 years of history, Egypt has long stood at the crossroads of culture and commerce. This year, it hosts a unique celebration of diplomacy and cultural exchange. And here in Cairo, South Korea and Egypt are celebrating 30 years of diplomatic ties with a series of events promoting further cultural exchange. A collaborative concert between the Cairo Symphony Orchestra and Korean soprano Cho Soo-mi symbolized this friendship between the two nations, resonating with themes of unity, peace, and cooperation.
I believe that through music we can show and we can feel and we can share about our true feeling, which is like peace and take care of each other.
Those cultural ties were also shown through a special exhibition which focused on traditional Korean gift boxes. Usually made from mother-of-pearl lacquerware, the boxes are typically given as gifts, and several boxes that were on display had been given as diplomatic gifts to Egypt. The exhibition also featured other diplomatic artifacts including gifts, official documents, and video archives that reflect the evolving cultural dialogue between the two nations.
There are actually fascinating parallels. From Korean Hanji and Egypt's ancient papyrus, this exhibition worked on bridging two distinct yet resonant traditions.
The exhibition is being held at the Museum of Islamic Art in Cairo, the largest of its kind in the world.
It's both a welcome and refreshing opportunity to spotlight Korea's connection to our region. I hope this successful collaboration leads to more Korean exhibitions here in the future.
I came today to see an exhibition that beautifully blends Egyptian and Korean cultures. It's a dynamic exhibition that mixes Islamic and Korean elements really well.
As Korea and Egypt celebrate this diplomatic milestone, the events in Cairo not only honor the past, but help build a stronger, more connected future.
While 30 years may not be long, it's been meaningful. We've built strong cooperation, and as a strategic hub, I hope more Koreans take interest in Egypt's culture and history to foster lasting economic and cultural partnerships.
An Sung-jin, Arirang News, Cairo.
A prominent platform for contemporary art has opened its doors, and this year artists there seek to give shape to elements that lack a tangible form, ranging from sounds to even traditional thoughts. Our Pyun Ye-young explains.
A faint siren echoes through a darkened room. It isn't an emergency, but an artwork. Elsewhere, an empty grave takes shape in a multimedia installation. Various forms of folding screens are reassembled into sculptural landscapes. Just a few steps away, stones splattered with ketchup that trick artificial intelligence into thinking they're hot dogs. This is the Korea Artist Prize 2025, now open at the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Seoul. Since its launch in 2012, the annual prize has become one of the most influential platforms for contemporary art in Korea. These works may look very different, but they share the same question. How do we make the invisible visible? That's the heart of Korea Artist Prize 2025. This year's featured artists Kim Young-eun, Lee Myung-ju, Kim Ji-pyong, and the collective Unmake Lab unveil 4 vastly different worlds. While the exhibition wasn't conceived with a single theme in mind, curators later found a striking commonality. All 4 artists, in their own way, are engaged in probing hidden histories, beliefs, and perceptions that slip past everyday attention.
The artists here are all incredibly imaginative, and the messages in their works are very distinct. It's hard to put into words, but the way the artist captures subtle details through their own perspective and weaves them into the work felt truly special.
Kim Young-eun transforms sound into political memory, reconstructing the sirens of the post-war era into a meditation on how sound shape history. Lee Myung-ju builds an empty grave inspired by the Korean kamyo custom, fusing superstition with virtual reality to ask how belief takes form in an age of science. Kim Ji-pyong interprets techniques found in 동양화 or traditional Eastern paintings and revitalizes East Asian traditions with aspects found in East Asian myths. An Unmake Lab turns humor into critique, flipping the logic of AI to show how fragile the line is between human perception and machine prediction.
Through these artists, if you take a closer look at the senses you might usually overlook, things that may be around you, but you've never really thought about, I think the exhibition will feel all the more engaging.
The exhibition runs through February, with one final winner to be named in January. But beyond the prize itself, it's an invitation for audiences to step into shifting landscapes, where history, myth, and technology overlap in unexpected ways. Hyun-yeong, Arirang News.
And historical landmarks here in the capital city will be open to visitors for free from October 3rd to October 9th in celebration of the Chuseok holiday. Now, these venues include Gyeongbokgung Palace, Changdeokgung Palace, Deoksugung Palace, and Changgyeonggung Palace, as well as Chongmu Shrine and the royal tombs of the Joseon dynasty. However, the secret garden Huwon at Changdeokgung Palace will require an admission fee as usual.
We need to be careful of the autumn heavy rain all over the country. There will be more than 100 millimeters of rain in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province, the west coast of Chungcheongnam-do province, and more than 80 millimeters in inland areas of Gangwon-do province and inland areas of Chungcheongnam-do province until tomorrow. There will be some times when it rains very heavily, around 20 to 30 millimeters per hour. Rain in the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province will mostly stop tomorrow morning. Then the Chungcheong-do and Jeollado provinces will continue to have rain until tomorrow afternoon. And the Gyeongsang-do provinces and Jeju Island will have rain until night. Seoul will start off at 20 degrees tomorrow morning, Daegu and Gyeongju at 22 degrees. Highs will go up to 27 degrees in Seoul, Chuncheon, and Gwangju, 31 degrees in Jeju. Frequent rain will continue throughout the rest of this week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.